Hello, everyone. I'm going to wait for about another 1 minute or so just to make sure that everybody that wants to get in has a moment to log in and get ready. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure people will continue to trickle in, and so we have a few minutes of housekeeping to take care of right at the beginning here, and then we'll get started. So my name is Kiki Dilly. Nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us today for our Dealing with Jerks webinar. Just as a housekeeping item on your screen, you should be primarily seeing the PowerPoint presentation, and you should additionally be seeing a small box on the left-hand side of the screen with the presenter. That's me. And on the right side of the menu, you will see a private chat icon. Please use that icon to type your questions throughout the presentation. I will do my best to address them as I can during the presentation, but if we're running short on time or if there appears to be a lot of questions that are popping in, I might wait until the end just to make sure that we can get through all of the content. If you have audio or video issues during the presentation, please click the No Audio or Video button below the PowerPoint on your screen and follow the instructions. If you have any questions about the webinar, you can email education@altitude.law. That's education@altitude, ALTITUDE.LAW. And lastly, there will be a survey that pops up at the end of the webinar. We really appreciate any feedback you can provide. Your thoughts and opinions assist us with improving our future presentations, so please don't hold back, and I really do make changes to my presentations based on that feedback, so I would really appreciate that. All right, so let's get started here. Like I said, my name is Kiki Dilly, and I am one of the shareholders here with Altitude Community Law, and I run our debt recovery department. I have been doing that for, not running the department, but I have been doing debt recovery for about 16 years. And so I have a lot of experience dealing with jerks in this industry. I tell people that I'm the trifecta of things that people hate because I'm an attorney who does collections for HOAs. And those are things that people hate. Not everybody and not all of those things, but those three things combined together tend to sometimes bring out the worst in people. And so I have a lot of experience dealing with people who have big feelings and they're not necessarily handling them very well. So what we're going to talk about today is a lot of just practical advice about the different kind of jerks that we deal with in our industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about, governing documents of the association and how those can help you deal with the jerks that you run across. But we're also going to talk about just, advice on how you can handle these different sorts of situations and how they might pop up in your world as managers. They can show up certainly anywhere in your life. You can deal with jerks at the airport, at the grocery store, at work, at board meetings, all over the place. But we're really going to focus on how these jerks show up in your work life and the specific methods and options of dealing with them. Because the difference between dealing with jerks in a professional environment versus dealing with jerks out in your private life is that most of the time when you're dealing with difficult people, like I said, at the grocery store, at the airport, a lot of the times those are one-off situations and you can say something back to them that you maybe regret later or, engage with them in a way that maybe isn't very professional. And it's probably not going to have much of an impact on your life beyond just being disappointed in yourself of how you responded in that particular situation. But the difference with the professional ways that we in this industry deal with people is that you are going to be seeing these same people over and over and over again in your life, as long as you work with that board or that association or those coworkers even sometimes. And so you can't just blow them off as, you know, these people are just difficult and I need to get through the next 10 minutes of my life and never deal with them again. Same thing with, you know, mouthing off to them. It's not a great plan because you're going to have to deal with them soon again anyway. And throughout this presentation, we're going to be talking about some, frankly, stereotypes of the sort of jerks that I see and how they appear in our collective professional lives. But realistically, these types of people can be any sort of person. They can pop up anywhere. They can be any sort of person. So going back to this, the types of jerks that we're going to talk about, there's know-it-all jerks, there's answer-shopping jerks, there's offensive jerks, there's self-centered jerks, and there's dangerous jerks. And we're going to talk about all of these and some subsets of these and some advice on how to deal specifically with each kind of situation. And then at the end, we're also going to talk about some overarching advice on how to deal with just jerks in general. So the first kind of jerk that we're going to talk about is know-it-all jerks. And know-it-all jerks tend to have the following characteristics. They want to be very involved in every conversation and every decision. They tend to know everything that there is to know about everything, and they cannot let a conversation finish or pass without them adding what they think is very valuable, very relevant information, whether or not everybody else thinks that. They also tend to have the last word in any conversation, and they cause everybody else to wonder why you're even there, right? If this person knows everything about everything that there is to know, why are you paying me for my expertise, or why are they paying you to be a manager and bring your expertise to the table? And these people can be really difficult. All of these people can be really difficult. Some examples of know-it-all jerks. The thing that I probably hear the most is I Googled it and I'm sure that you have all heard that too. I have literally heard that from someone this week already. This person said to me, "Are you sure that's right? Because I Googled it and I found." And that's a little bit, it's nice that people have so much information at their fingertips and that we can all be better educated all the time. But Google is not going to provide an answer that takes into account the nuances of the particular situation or all of your life experience and your professional experience in your industry. And so that can be a difficult thing to deal with. As an attorney, one of the things that makes me absolutely crazy is when another attorney is on a board or is an opposing counsel that doesn't work in my industry, or sometimes is a defendant in my cases, and they say, "Well, I'm a lawyer and here's what I know," because lawyers tend to think that they know everything about everything. And then something that I got a lot when I was younger in my career, that some of you that are earlier on in your career and are younger might hear sometimes, is something along the lines of, "I've been doing this or in this industry for longer than you've been alive, and here's why you know nothing about what you're talking about." That can be a really demoralizing, obnoxious thing that someone says because they think they know what they're talking about, whether they do or not. So I will tell you, I one time had someone tell me, this was years and years ago, but a defendant told me that her dad's best friend, or her best friend's dad, her best friend's dad was a lawyer, and she talked to him and he said, blah, 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 whatever it is that he said. And in that moment, I was out of patience. I had been talking to this girl for a long time on the phone. We were going around and around in circles, and I did not keep control of myself like I should have. And I said to her, well, I am a lawyer and I'm telling you he's wrong and this is the situation. And that was probably 13, 14 years ago. And I still remember it because it is something that I am not proud of how I handled the situation. So I would advise to you to not stoop to that level and don't respond to someone in that way because it will stick with you based on my experience. The things that I tend to deal with now or tend to rely on now whenever I'm in a situation where either it's easier, certainly if you know going into it that you're going to be dealing with a know-it-all jerk. If you have a board member who's a know-it-all jerk, if you have someone that you work with that you're going to be in a meeting with that is a know-it-all jerk, it's certainly easier going into those situations if you can be prepared and know what you're getting into. And so in those situations, the things that I tend to rely on now is that I want to be as prepared as I can with documentation to back up the position that I'm taking or the advice that I'm giving, because that way if someone says, you know, I'm a lawyer and I think that we should handle it this way, it's easier to say, sure, you know, I understand where you're coming from, and in some situations that might be right, but given these specific circumstances here, and here's, you know, my documentation of, you know, why we need this type of citing or whatever it is that you're arguing with a board member about. Here's the things that we have looked at, and here's exactly why I think that you should make this decision. Same thing with relying on your experts. If you have I'll keep using the attorney example because that's an easy one in this situation. If you have a board member who is an attorney, they're probably not an HOA attorney. And so they probably don't have the expertise in this area that they need to be able to understand the nuances of the situation. So as much as you can, make sure you're relying on your available experts to provide the information to talk about the situation with these people. Best possible scenario is if you can have the attorney at the meeting when you know that there's going to be a contentious decision, so that the HOA attorney can address the nuance, can kind of talk to this attorney in a way that will help them understand they don't know as much as they think they know, in a not condescending way. But the more that you can rely on your experts, whether it's, you know, the roofer or the landscaping vendor, the attorney, the accountant, whatever it is that you're talking about, push that interaction to them, because they're going to be better equipped to have that conversation with the know-it-all and be able to talk in a way that helps them understand, but then also can answer any other questions that your other board members or homeowners might have in that situation. And then as a honorable mention category under the know-it-all jerks, I have deflecting jerks. And the kind of hallmark examples that I see as a deflecting jerk is when someone cannot admit they were wrong when they thought they knew everything about everything and something went badly. And so that comes up in the work context or at the HOA context in our industry, when someone says, well, so-and-so told me to do it this way, because they want to pass the blame to somebody else and say that they told me. Or the worst kind, as far as I'm concerned, is when someone tells me, well, you said it was fine, and so I did it that way. And when you're dealing with that kind of person, especially like in a work environment, I have found it is really helpful when you have conversations with them to make sure that you document things. That can show up certainly if you're having discussions with board members outside of a board meeting. If someone calls you and asks for, you know, something or how they should handle something, I always find it helpful to email them after the conversation and say, you know, hey, just to follow up on the conversation that we had, and make sure that everybody's on the same page. Here's a summary of what we talked about. Here's what we discussed. Here's what we decided. And that way you can document what was said if it ever comes up again in the future. All right, our next kind of jerk is answer shopping jerks. Answer shopping jerks have characteristics like they refuse to accept answers that they don't like. They want a specific answer and they will continue asking either different people or asking the same questions in slightly different ways to try to get to the answer that they want to hear. They tend to not being used to being told no. They're used to getting their way, whether that's because in their professional life, they are used to being the boss and now they're on a board and they have to have consensus with the other board members to be able to do something. Sometimes they can be retired people who have been at the top of their industry when they were working, or that they were self-employed and they were able to make their own rules. But one way or another, these people do not like to be told no. Some examples of answer shopping jerks is in the board realm. They will want to interview vendor after vendor after vendor in order to get someone that will tell them that they can do what they want to do. It certainly happens a lot in the legal field where you'll have a association or board that goes through a lot of managers, the management companies. They're not happy with several different managers at one company, and then they end up switching management companies altogether. They do the same thing with their landscaping companies, their snow removal companies, their attorneys. They're just they move around a lot because they want people who will do what they say with very little pushback. And that can be certainly very frustrating from your end and from my end, and probably for other board members as well. And as I said, they oftentimes tend to ask the same questions repeatedly with slightly different facts to try to get to the answer that they want. So some options for how you might handle that kind of situation or that kind of board member, homeowner that you run into. First and foremost, I would encourage you to get other stakeholders to get involved with the decisions. So make sure if you have a board that has one person on it who drives the bus for making these sort of decisions, the more you can get the other board members involved in the conversations, involved in the discussions with vendors, involved in actually being a board member and being involved with what they're supposed to be doing, the better off you are. Because ultimately, if you're talking about this answer shopping person at the board level, they're only one voice of however many people you have on that board, and everyone is going to be held responsible in the eyes of the homeowners for these decisions that are being made. And the constant turnover in vendors and how one vendor did a better job at snow plowing than another, or whatever the case may be, the more people you can get involved with the decisions, the better. And as I said earlier, which is probably a theme throughout here, the more documentation you can have of phone discussions, the better. I personally have had conversations with people professionally and personally both, where I have come away from a conversation on the phone thinking that a decision was made based on very different circumstances than what I was later told were the actual circumstances. And so in the event, or to the extent that you can document those phone conversations and say, we talked about this, just memorializing this, looping in all of the other board members, making sure everyone has all of the information. We talked about this is the circumstances, these are what I suggested, these are what we decided. that's great. Summary emails are really useful, not only for later on when board members turn over or managers turn over, but also for your own documentation and protecting yourself. All right. Now we're going to talk about my favorite category, only because I have a lot of examples in this category. Offensive jerks. Everybody knows these people. They blast everyone on social media. They maybe put in professional complaints against you with Dora. Against me, they complain about me to the bar exam and say that I am a terrible lawyer and should have my license yanked because I'm not responding in a way that they want. We tend to call these keyboard warriors because sometimes in person they are much more docile, but they're the people that you and I and everyone else will get 3 emails from overnight blowing you up about how you're not doing your job or you're a terrible person or whatever the case may be. Sometimes they're, like I said, they're more docile in person and they are only brave and offensive behind their keyboard. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes in person, they tend to interrupt other people. At a board meeting, sometimes you'll have one board member who plows past everyone else and makes all the decisions and doesn't take into account or let anybody else speak. Sometimes you'll have those people who make snide comments under their breath while someone else is talking. Sometimes you'll have them rolling their eyes at other people. These people are really difficult to deal with in the moment. And as some comic relief here, I have several examples of emails that I and my team here at in our debt recovery department have actually received from homeowners. So here's some examples. This person said, I am going to sue Ms. Classic, who is one of the debt recovery attorneys here, and Altitude, for defamation of character and persecution. I have all the other ledgers of the board and all else, which I'm sure he did not, but okay. I will be exposing you guys to the media, and I will use all of my might and power to make sure all the homeowners know, and we will prevail. You have hours before I tell the media if you guys do not comply. He then called and told our admin team member that picked up the phone that he was sick of this poop, shall we say, and that he was going to research the attorney to find out if she's cheating on her husband. Now, Sheridan Classic, who's this attorney, wasn't married at the time, but that didn't necessarily matter. It was certainly upsetting to me and to her because she did at the time, it obviously still does, but her daughter was very young. And it was extremely creepy and inappropriate and offensive that this guy was saying that he was going to be researching her. I don't know what that meant for him, but that was certainly very creepy. Another example. Why are all you attorneys effing a-holes? That's something that I hear more often than I would like, or something along those lines. But, you know, as an example of how people have no filter sometimes when they are behind a keyboard. This is wrong, and your witchy lady that avoids my phone calls is also ripping me off. I hope she gets her face eaten by a rat. Been called you freaking witch. Somebody else said, I'm sorry for your unfortunate reading capabilities. You cowards won't respond. You just want to take my hard-earned money. I probably work more hours and way harder than you office people, which maybe, I don't know. And then my last example here. You people are the scum of the earth. And if you ask me, are the reason she's gone because this woman had recently passed. I hope it makes you happy. I also hope hearing this weighs heavily on your conscience for the rest of your pathetic life. Happy effing holidays to you and yours. So how do we deal with things like that? I suspect that every single one of you on this webinar has received something along those lines. A lot of times it's not face-to-face. A lot of times it is an email. And the best advice that I can give to you is do not respond to that email the moment you read it. That will not do any good at all in any way. You're going to respond to it in a very emotional way, and that will not play out well. You're not going to be happy with yourself later when you look back at that response, I'm sure. And the thing that I like to tell managers and board members whenever they are dealing with that kind of an email, whether it is from a board member or more likely probably from an angry homeowner, is that when you respond to something in writing, you want to respond in a way that you will not be ashamed if you have to read your response out loud on the stand in a courtroom. And that is something that I have had to tell myself over and over and over again when I get messages like that. So make sure that you do not respond right away. You absolutely want to take a breath, take several hours maybe to come down from the initial rush of emotion and anger and hurt and all of the big feelings to be able to respond to this person. The best way that I have found is that if there is any kind of substance in the email at all, if they are asking for anything, if they are giving you a piece of information that outside of all of the offensive terms and the accusations and things like that, if they had just emailed you that one piece of information or that one question, if there's something in there that you would have responded to in another circumstance, if it had come without all of the horrible stuff, then you need to respond. But stay on topic. Only respond to the actual things that need to be responded to. And the accusations are not something that needs to be responded to. You respond to them and say, thank you very much for letting me know that the sidewalk outside your home has ice. I will get the snow removal people over there right away. And do not respond about anything else. It is not going to play out well. If you run across people who are offensive at board meetings, a lot of times going into a board meeting, you'll have a heads up or some knowledge that the meeting is going to be contentious, or you will have gotten an email from a homeowner who is angry at you or at the board for a very specific reason. If you think that there is any reason why you might have someone contentious coming to the meeting, make sure at the beginning of your meeting, and even if you don't think that, it's not a bad idea just to get in the habit in general, to refer to the association's conduct of meetings policy. It's going to say in there, we're going to have a homeowner forum. Everybody gets their 3 minutes. We need to talk to each other in a respectful manner. Harassment, anger, screaming, swearing, things like that are not going to be able to be tolerated. If you can set that tone right at the beginning, that can help stop those situations before they start. And it's really easy when you have a homeowner then who disregards that to stay on task and refer back to it and say, thank you, Mr. Whatever, your 3 minutes are up. It's extra easy whenever you have virtual meetings and those people are virtual, because if they are violating the policy and they're not respecting the 3 minutes or they're not respecting the rules, they keep jumping in and interrupting people. That's terrible on a virtual meeting because nobody can hear when people are talking over each other. And after you give them a warning of, we need to stay on topic, we need to stay on task, please, be respectful, please make sure you're following the policy, you've had your 3 minutes, let them know that you will mute them and go ahead and mute them. if they do it again. That is one thing that came out of COVID with virtual meetings that I think is really helpful dealing with those sorts of people in the virtual meeting realm. You may also have a harassment policy that we can put together if you have an association that has a history of dealing with maybe more difficult people. We all know those associations are out there, and having a harassment policy for those associations can help solve problems, maybe not before they arise, but then you have a clear roadmap for how that sort of situation may play out. The other thing that can be used as kind of a strategic way of dealing with difficult homeowners at meetings is if you have homeowner forum listed on your agenda right before the board is scheduled to go into executive session, that is an easy way to shut down an otherwise out of control meeting, is just saying, you know, okay, we've had our homeowner forum, we've addressed everyone has had their 3 minutes, we're now going to go into executive session. That's a little heavy-handed, but in the right circumstance, that can go really well to bring the temperature down in the room a little bit. And even if it's in the middle and you all are coming back to have an open meeting after that and you expect those people to still be there, there's a little bit of a cooling off time in between while they have that executive session. Obviously, you can't abuse that. You can't use executive session for items that aren't allowed to be discussed in executive session, but if that is an option, it can be effective. All right. Self-centered jerks. These people tend to believe no matter how many other associations you deal with, that they are your most important owner, your most important board, your most important vendor that you have ever dealt with, and that you will ever hope to deal with, and that you should do whatever they need immediately. These people, if it's a board, they also tend to change management companies, and vendors relatively frequently because no one gives them the constant attention and focus that they believe that they deserve. Sometimes, honestly, if they are an enormous client and they are paying you more than anyone else pays you, they're right? But most of the time, these people are they're not actually the highest paying people. A lot of times they could be homeowners who are not on the board in any way, and they still blow up your emails because they need something and they need something now. They demand immediate responses to you, and it doesn't matter, that something will take time or that you need to do research or that you're busy doing something else. They demand an immediate response from you, but they also tend to be the same people who, whenever you need something from them, they do not respond to you, which is a very maddening characteristic. Some examples of the self-centered jerks are, I left you a voicemail 2 hours ago and I haven't heard from you, or we need to get this taken care of immediately. Sometimes, obviously, that's true, but the actual emergencies don't fall under the category of self-centered jerks. We see that sometimes in boards, but honestly, a lot of times it is individual homeowners that feel that you as the manager are at their beck and call all the time. We see it a lot with covenant enforcement violators who say something along the lines of, this is my property and I own this land and I can do whatever I want with it. In the collections world, we see this person a lot because they will claim that the association is not taking care of whatever it is that they feel like isn't being taken care of. And so they don't have to pay their assessments because the association isn't doing their job. Why should I have to pay my assessments? They basically, a lot of these people aren't able or willing to see the big picture of the association, and they are very focused only on their own situation and their own home, and they lose the concept that this is a community, that this is an association, that we are all part of together. So some options of how to deal with self-centered jerks. If you have a client, an association that is a self-centered jerk and feels that, you know, they are your biggest client, even though they're not, and that they demand things from you immediately 24/7, and that you should act like they are your only client, I would suggest being explicit about expectations. When you onboard a new association, I think it's always a good idea to have a very frank conversation with the board about what they expect, not only from you as a manager, what they think is a reasonable, you know, turnaround time from you when they ask you to find a copy of a contract or a contact name for someone or whatever it is that the board is asking you, versus what is their expectation regarding non-emergency requests from homeowners. I'm not talking about the situation where there's a broken pipe and there's water leaking everywhere. That is a legitimate emergency and someone needs to deal with that right away. I'm talking about, you know, the person who calls up and says the tree outside my home needs to be trimmed immediately. This is an emergency. It needs to happen right now. What is the board's expectations? And I think those are two separate questions. What does the board expect from you as the manager when the board has a question? And what does the board expect from you whenever a homeowner has a question? Sometimes those will line up and they'll say, you know, we think it's reasonable for a day either way. Sometimes they'll have more leeway between the two, but I think it's important to understand the character of the board and what they expect from you. And if you have a board who does not, how do I say this? If you have a board who is needier than average, when it's time to renegotiate your contract and tell them, you know, you are, maybe don't say needier, but you expect more from me as a manager than is industry standard. And so we need to renegotiate. Either you expect less, which isn't going to happen, or you pay us more. And that's fair. If they're expecting more from you than what your contract says, you should be charging them more. Also, if you have owners who are very demanding and your board wants you to respond to them immediately, or you have a board that you know is very demanding and that they want to be responded to immediately, assuming that, you know, they're paying you for it, use technology to your advantage. You can have messages from certain people automatically flagged as important. And that way, if you have a client who is paying you more to be more at their, more available to them, then that way it's easier to flag those and know that when you're at your desk, you need to deal with those ones first, rather than searching through, you know, wading through your 50 emails that have come in the last couple of hours to make sure that there's nothing in there from, you know, so-and-so who is going to start calling you repeatedly if you don't answer their email right away. Technology is really great for that. And also, don't set yourself up for failure. The people who expect immediate responses from you often will take an extraordinary amount of time getting the information that you need back to them. So just go into it expecting delays from them, even though they will not give you the courtesy of giving you time to respond to them. When you're dealing with these people in the covenant enforcement or the collections realm, you want to make sure that you're following your covenant enforcement policy. If you have someone who isn't following the rules because they fall under the self-centered jerk category of this is my land and you can't tell me what I can do with it, you absolutely want to make sure that you are going after them on the covenant enforcement side. You want to be sure that you're following your policy, that you have a policy that's updated as of the 2022 laws, so that you can legally make sure that they are following the rules, because them painting their house pink or purple or whatever color, or putting up a giant playhouse in their backyard that's ugly, or whatever it is that they have done that they feel like they have the ability to do regardless of what the rules are, you do want to make sure that you are holding them accountable, because you don't want to have selective enforcement issues not dealing with difficult people. I know it's hard, and some people come across your desk and you don't want to deal with them, but you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you are enforcing the covenants against some people and not enforcing the covenants against others. Definitely play fair and make sure that everyone is being treated the same. In the collections realm, I talked about how a lot of times these people say, well, you're not shoveling the sidewalks to my liking, and so I don't want to pay my assessments. That is a very self-centered way of looking at things, and it's frustrating, but from a legal standpoint, it also doesn't hold any water. Most association documents explicitly say in their declarations that a homeowner can't withhold payment of their monthly assessments just because they're unhappy with how the association is taking care of something or doing something. And that makes sense, right? Because if you had all the homeowners unhappy with something about the association and everybody stopped paying their assessments, then the association has no money to do anything and literally cannot hold up their end of the bargain. So that is a good piece of knowledge if those people say something like that to you. And then a subsection of our self-centered jerks are what I've referred to as interfering jerks. These are the people who interfere with your contractors. They can be sometimes the people who just follow the contractors around and are constantly talking to them and telling them they're doing their job wrong, or wanting them to change how they're doing something, or somehow just interacting with the contractors in a way that is very interfering and inappropriate. This can also be the people who won't let the contractor into their home to be able to access something that the contractor is there to do. Both of those can be very frustrating. They can also be expensive for the association if it delays the project, causes the contractor to not be able to do what they're there to do. And so in those cases, I think at first it is important for the manager or the board to communicate with that person first and foremost and just say, hey, you're interfering in this. We really need you to back away and let them do their job. We need you to let them into your unit to be able to access the roof or whatever it is that they're, or the attic or whatever it is that they're doing, or the pipes, whatever the situation is. Having clear communication with people and certainly giving everyone prior notice that it's happening will help with that. I recognize that that's all very common sense, but a little extra communication can go a long way to prevent problems down the road. But some communication is not going to help. And if you have someone who is preventing a contractor from doing their job, whether it's interfering with them at the site, telling them to go away or that they're doing something wrong, trying to get them to change the work order, or limiting access to their unit so that they can't do what they're doing, make sure that you get the attorney involved. We can write them a cease and desist letter if we need to. We can have a court order that they have to allow access to the unit, which is a longer process and can get certainly a little more confrontational. But if the access to the unit really is needed, you have options. And certainly if you find yourself in that situation, talk to the association's attorney and get them involved in giving some advice and dealing with this owner to find the right way to get the problem solved. All right. And then my final category of jerks are the dangerous jerks. I'm not going to talk very much about this because there's really not a whole lot to be done about it from your end or from my end. If you have people who are threatening violence, who are saying that they're going to hurt someone, that it left you a voicemail that is, you know, says that they're going to, I don't know, come after you or something, call the police. You don't need to call the attorney necessarily. You don't need to try to engage with them. I would recommend call the police. If it gets bad enough and is egregious enough, then you can certainly talk to the attorney about getting a restraining or a protection order against this person. But dangerous jerks should not be messed with. You should just get the police involved. First and foremost, you need to protect yourself. And same thing for board members. If they are feeling threatened by an owner, they shouldn't be calling you saying that they are feeling threatened. They shouldn't be calling my office saying that they're feeling threatened, that they're worried that this person is going to harm them. They need to just go to the police. All right, so then those are my main 5 types of jerks that I run across on a disappointingly frequent basis. And so I have some overarching advice to keep in mind when you're dealing with jerks in general. Ultimately, remember, this is about them. It is most likely not about you. This person probably has a lot of other stuff and other stressors going on in their life that has pushed them to the point that for whatever reason, they are being difficult with you. And you have to deal with it, but it's not really a commentary usually on you as a human. They can, you know, type whatever it is that they're going to type to you, call you whatever names that they're going to call you, but it's probably not really about you. If it had been one of your coworkers managing the board, if it was one of the other attorneys in my department who happened to get this particular case on their desk, they probably would have received the exact same communication from this person that I have. It's not about me. Or it's not about my personality. It's not about my value as a human. It's not about me as a human. It is about this person and their feelings that they're having in that moment. Keep in mind, if this interaction takes place at a board meeting and you have a homeowner who is out of control, being disruptive, interrupting, not respecting the conduct of meetings, 3 minutes, whatever it is that the case is, most people that are at that meeting are seeing what you're seeing as well. Most everyone there internally is rolling their eyes and thinking this person is being ridiculous. So keep that in mind. You're not alone in these situations when it's in a public forum like that. Other people are looking at this situation and internally acknowledging that this other person is the problem, not you. Keep in mind, everybody has bad days. Like I said in my example at the beginning, I have said some of these things. I think we have probably all been, well, maybe not the dangerous jerk, but we've all been the other jerks at one point or another in our lives. Everybody has a bad day, and it is awful when that person's bad day is directed at you, but you need to give people a little bit of grace sometimes and understand that, you know, sometimes we all have bad days. Remember, neighbor to neighbor disputes are generally not going to be your problem. So if you have someone who is yelling about a neighbor, unless they are violating a covenant, certainly if they're violating a covenant, then it's your problem and you need to follow the covenant enforcement process. But any sort of neighbor to neighbor personality disputes are really neighbor to neighbor. And the more that you can not involve yourself in those disputes and those discussions, the better. If you have questions about whether or not a specific interaction between neighbors is an association problem or is not, reach out to the association's attorney, give them a rundown of the situation. They can tell you if you have any liability in this, if you have any responsibility, but a lot of times you don't. I always advise people it's a good idea to try to stop jerks before they happen. And there are some things that you can do as a manager to set the tone for the association and for the board meeting of stopping those jerks. A lot of things are common sense and are things that the legislature is focusing on right now also, like communication and transparency. The more that you can tell people, you know, hey, we're going to be doing repairs to the roofs, so it's going to be disruptive. And I'm sorry, but there's no way of getting around this. Please be aware that, you know, we've done the following things to try to minimize the disruption, but here's the dates and the times that we anticipate them being on your roof, so please plan accordingly. Same thing with, like, if you have to increase assessments, that's something that gets people very worked up very quickly. If you can provide to people, you and the board collectively, the reasoning behind, you know, why are these assessments going up so much? Well, insurance rates are going up, and you know, we haven't been withholding for reserves properly for the last 10 years. Whatever the case may be, the more information that you can give people, the better. And that way you have two benefits to that. One, you're less likely to get people exploding at you because they don't feel like they have enough information to understand the situation. And two, other people that are at that board meeting who have paid attention to the information coming out already have a base level understanding of why the board has made the decision that they've made and why they're recommending or doing what they're doing. And so that will help them see that this person who's being disruptive is not looking at all of the information or is out of line. You want to have open board meetings to the extent that you can. Obviously, with executive session, there are the things that should be discussed in executive session, but the more open meetings that you can have, the better. We want to provide access to the homeowners as much as we can for them to be able to come to the meetings if they want, see the decisions that are being made, see the logic behind the decisions and the discussions that are being had. And the more that you as a manager and your boards can discourage the us versus them dynamic that some boards have towards their homeowners, the better. We don't want to encourage that kind of mentality because the board is there to serve what's best for the association, which is, you know, the homeowners as a whole. And that mentality of we are in charge and you are the enemy because you're not getting in line, that can be really disruptive and harmful to the association and the community as a whole. And also generally, I find that when you have people who are angry and upset about a decision or a situation that they find themselves in, letting them talk their piece and have their 3 minutes at the meeting or say their thing that they need to say to complain about why they think the landscaping isn't being done right can go a long way. It's good to let people say their piece, let them feel that they have been heard, do active listening, hear what they're saying, and then move on. That can do people a lot of good to just know that they have been heard. Whether it's from you, it's from the board, it's best to let them say what they need to say and let them feel heard. A few more things, make sure you have healthy boundaries. When you have people telling you that you're a terrible person, that will absolutely grate on you. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Make sure that you have healthy work-life balance to the extent that we in this industry are able to. And remind yourself that it is probably not about you. To the extent that you can, try to minimize contact with the people that are difficult. Although if you're talking about somebody in the HOA, on the board, a vendor that you have to deal with, that can't necessarily help you much, but to the extent that you can, try to minimize contact. Absolutely maintain your professionalism. Do not go get down on their level and say, "Nuh-uh, you're stupid because blah, blah, blah." Like I said at the beginning, anything that you put in writing, make sure that it is something that you would not be embarrassed to read out loud in a courtroom on the stand, because it can happen. And certainly stay calm. Letting your frustrations and your own anger boil over back at people is only going to escalate the situation. So as much as you can, make sure you stay calm. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left. We have some questions here that I am going to run through. We have, so this question says, can a unit owner to whom a complaint has been lodged legally request the identity of the person who made the complaint? Yes, if it is a written complaint, then you would need to provide them a copy of the complaint if they ask for it. But the caveat to that is if the manager or somebody else can verify the issue. So if it's a complaint that somebody, like, I don't know, put something up in their front yard that they shouldn't have there, if there's something that the manager can, or the board can go by and take a picture of and send in, then I don't think there's any need for that. But if it's something that nobody else is able to confirm, like it's something that can only be seen from a neighboring home because it's in the backyard, or it's, you know, a noise complaint from the middle of the night, to the extent that it's not something that you as a manager or the board can verify, then yes, you'll need to provide them a copy of the written complaint. And the reason for that is that, you know, or the logic behind that, I guess, or the justification for that is that in the event that it were to proceed to a covenant enforcement action and you'd be in court, that person would have to be there to testify that they heard or saw or whatever it is that they said, and that they filled out that complaint and that it's accurate, et cetera, et cetera. So they're going to have to find out eventually. Let's see here. So this person said, we have a lot of questions about harassment and cease and desist. Does it make sense to send a cease and desist letter to an owner that is harassing the board and management to the point that they have made 2 management companies and 4 board members quit? Maybe. It's the harassment and cease and desist things are very, very fact specific. If you have any kind of situations that you think might rise to the level of harassment, or how to deal with it, or interfering with contracts or anything like that, I would really strongly suggest that you reach out to the association's attorney and give them a rundown of the situation and ask them what they advise. It's very, very fact specific and not really something that I can address right here in the last 2 minutes of our session. How do you deal with someone who is the keyboard warrior and has been the jerk for over 3 years and knows very clearly how far to go without stepping over to the line to threaten what would allow for a protection order? That's a hard situation, honestly. I tend to encourage people to come to board meetings if they want to talk about things with the board specifically. That way, hopefully things can be addressed in a healthy way, but also address the actual underlying issue. A lot of times those people will not show up to the board meeting because they don't actually want to deal with the issue head on. They just want to scream at you from their keyboard. A lot of times, you know, in the industry that we're in, we don't have the option of blocking people because you have to sort through and make sure that there's nothing in there that you actually do need to deal with. You know, if you're able to charge people more, sometimes you're able to charge back. to an owner for your time if it rises to a certain level, if it becomes time consuming, and your management agreements allow for that. The association's documents allow for that. There's some things that can be done, but generally, honestly, sometimes people are just going to be jerks. I'm sorry, that's not very helpful. What do you do when they come into your office and they're very heated? That's a really good question. At my office, we have a window outside of our office and a little vestibule that people come to. We don't allow people inside of our office just for security and safety concerns. We, knock on wood, have never had anything happen that would cause problems, but you know, in the world we live in, it's always a possibility. We have a couple of tactics that we use to try to deal with people that are heated. You want to let them say their piece, let them feel heard, do active listening, make sure that they get out what they feel like they need to say, because a lot of times people just feel like nobody's listening and that they need to say what they need to say. The other tactic that we will sometimes use if people get heated is we will have someone else come out and handle the conversation from a perspective that they know nothing about what they're talking about. So for example, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, in the debt recovery department here, if we have someone who is screaming at our window and just won't calm down and won't leave, we will have very specific people that we know are very calm and very, they bring people down easily, from a completely unrelated department. It might be an administrative person. It might be someone from the transactional department that knows nothing about this case that can come out and, again, let the person feel heard, say, you know what, I will get this information to the person who needs it. We will give you a call back. Certainly you need to follow through and make sure all of that stuff happens. But those are the tactics that we take to kind of try to deflect some of that anger. But again, like I said, with the dangerous jerks, if anybody feels like actually threatened, call the police. That's what they're for. All right, I think I have covered most of the categories of the comments that people have asked, and we're a little bit over time, so I'm going to go ahead and shut it down. But if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. There's my email address. I'd say don't call me mean names, but you probably wouldn't be the first one today. So reach out to me if you have any questions, and if I can't answer them, I will certainly get them to someone who can. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.